Okay, so here we all are again. Brilliant. Here we are at the Flâneurs podcast. So today we're going to start with this. Might be a two-parter. This is going to be a big conversation, I think. And we've also been threatening to have this conversation for a long time. And I think I've been putting it off because it feels big. I have a lot of opinions on it, and I don't know whether I know where to start with it, or actually it might be that I don't know that I'll ever know where to finish on it. So that might be the reason why we haven't tackled it yet. But we're going to jump in with both feet now.
I mean,
Um,
frankly, Matt, you could have a whole podcast devoted to nothing but this topic, right? In
talk.
fact, almost this may almost become that, right? Because honestly, it's just such a big talk. It's interesting too, but sorry, keep going.
Feels like the season might be turning into this. We don't. I don't know. Yeah. And so to cut to the chase, this episode and maybe some following episodes are about office politics. They're
Mm.
about office politics and um, agility coaching within office politics. Um, and it's interesting because and Dan, you can put in post edit. Hopefully, you can put up some links or some visuals of like I've written articles before about this, about office politics, and about it's the job of an agile coach to be involved in office politics. So there's lots to say on that. And I first sort of thought that really strongly probably about 10 years ago, and I've written blog posts and articles about it a couple of times over the past few years. But what's interesting is it's still coming up. So like this week, Barry Overeem, who's co-founder of the Liberators, he put a post up on LinkedIn that described some of the attributes of burnout that he was hearing from like the agility coaching community around him. And I'll read those out now, and maybe Dan can flash it up on the post edit for those of you who are watching and not listening. But for those of you who are listening, this is some of the reasons that Barry shared for this burnout. We don't have a mandate to make decisions, is one of them, and that's interesting because mandate is quite political, party politics language. We're not heard, seen, and respected by management and the teams. Okay, so clearly they're going to want to change that situation. We're mostly seen as facilitators for fun workshops. We're stuck in the organization's quicksand. Doing nothing seems the best option. Each time we propose a change, we sink deeper into the quicksand. And here's the one that really caught my eye and my ear. Some days I feel more like a politician than an agile coach. And these are some of the reasons why people feel they're burning out. And I think this relates to one of the podcasts that we had on season one about the isolation and the loneliness of being an agile coach as well. I think some of those things that were described there would are attributes of feeling isolated as well, feeling alone in this sort of complicated mess that is organizations and people within organizations. But there was a response that I made to this, and I'll go through a few of those observations as well. So I responded thinking out loud because this person said we don't get to make decisions. I wonder if an org that would let agile coaches make decisions needs them. And by that I meant that if an org is going to let people make decisions, let people make decisions, then what's an agile coach? Because an agile coach usually helps people, usually comes in when they're real. One of the situations I walk into is that there is a lack of decision. People are not making decisions, therefore opportunities are going wasted. Innovation doesn't happen because people can't make decisions and they're waiting to be told what to do. And so I sort of feel like, is it an agile coach's role to make the decisions or to help people make decisions and be comfortable making decisions and not feeling like decisions are putting them on a long-term track to something that might fail? It's like we need to make decisions often and we need to understand what's coming, the complexities, and if things fail, make another decision, pivot, progress, all those sorts of things. That's an agile coach's job to help people reconcile themselves to and be competent and comfortable in. So that was like one of my first observations. And that I said, I don't see it as my role to make decisions. I mostly try to implement and help people see and use a conspicuous and or visual choice architecture with which to make better, more informed decisions. I also said about the things. So one of the things was about that further on in Barry's post was that people feel like I'm going to stop being an agile coach and go back to being a scrum master. I sort of said I don't think there's much of a difference between scrum masters and agile coaches. I don't. I think they're after the same thing, but I totally understand the desire to be in a more influential, smaller, closer to where the work happens role, because you can see your influence being enacted, and there's a more tighter feedback loop of here's what we're trying to achieve together, and here's what I'm encouraging you to achieve, and you're achieving it. When that's over a broader landscape or a broader environment, or I don't know, like a bigger set of people, that doesn't come as thick and fast, does it? I don't suppose. And so I think you can feel more worthwhile and valuable when your world's smaller like that. But then I thought then the real thing that I responded back, that I called out Dan, because Dan was the one who pinged me and tagged me into this conversation. And I said that I view the role of agility coach as an office politics political activist. And so when someone says, like they did, some days I feel more like a politician than an agile coach, I think, well, good. You should be. You should be trying to change the politics of the organization. That's generally what we're there to do. And by politics, I mean like how they make judicious decisions and govern large groups of people, and in terms of like economics and stuff like that, how they apportion resources and status and things like that to get the right outcomes. We are absolutely a part of optimizing that for maybe a stated good, or maybe for a greater good when it's not stated. So I think we should be office political activists. I don't think it's a bad thing. That I'll say it out loud. I think it's concerning that someone in an agile coach position is feeling burned out because they're feeling like a politician trying to help people make these decisions that they're making. I think that shouldn't be. You should draw energy from that. If you're in the right position, if you are supposed to be an agile coach, that should give you energy.
I think
okay.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Matt. I absolutely agree. But this is where it gets into such a big topic, because there's so many nuances here. Because when people should. Politics exists whether or not you want to play in it. So yes, you're going to be a politician. Absolutely. I think part of the issue that we face, and I don't want to distract too much from the topic and draw us places, that if you look at politics outside the office, we suck at politics these days. Like we really, as people, like we don't do politics well, because what we do is we other the other side, and we use language that's othering, and we talk about, like, we make enemies of people. And so this is just how politics works these days. For whatever reason, this is like, we don't want to get into, like, there's all kinds of causes, but that's how it works, right? And so if you start doing these things in the office, it gets really hostile. And like, this is, we take, I think, a lot of what we see culturally happening around us, and the way that we experience politics affects how we see people be office political activists. And that can be, I turn off from a lot of that stuff that's national in the US anyway, even global. I'm like, I just can't deal, because it's just, those people are being crazy and I don't want to deal with it. And so I get that perspective of, like, some of the way that people do politics is brutal. And it can be really brutal and really affect your personal financial well-being very quickly in a company, right? Politics.
I mean, this is like you said, there's different, many nuances to this. And the first key word for me was, I think, Matt, you said something to the effect, if you're supposed to be an agile coach. And that's the first thing. I think agile coaching and most of the other derivatives of it, have gained, I think, tremendous value and momentum from the myriad of different, the diverse matrix of profiles, people, experiences that, magnetize, that are drawn to the profession, right? Because of the creed to help, do better, right? Whatever that is for an organization. Having said that, it's also that's also its Achilles heel as well, because I think a lot of people go into it, thinking the job is one thing, and then along that path, they figure out, oh, it's way more complex than that. And so, you'll often find I've often found myself having conversations of, okay, then, since it's this complex, because once you step out of the sort of team agility aspect, you're stepping into organizational complexity and hence politics, right? Because
Yes.
you're talking about how entities relate to one another, how power structures relate to one another, how power culture influence, exists, and are, sort of exhibited, how much clarity there is around purpose, et cetera. And so, yeah, that's a very complex world, and then when you're dealing with leadership involved with that, with the pressure of results and objectives, it's quite complex. Now, some people thrive off that complexity and welcome it, and others completely shy away from that. They want to deal with just a simple sort of, I don't want to say basic, because it has its own complexity, but reduced complexity of within a team, which would be, at a max maybe 5 to 12, 15, whatever people, but it's within a controlled area, even though there are outside influences to that. But I think so that feeling of, I don't want to be an agile coach, I want to just go back to the simple Scrum mastering stuff, is a feeling of dealing with less complexity that I'm more comfortable dealing with, because outside of that, it's just way too much. I don't have the mandate. My sponsor tells me I have to do this, but the mandate is bigger. There's not enough courage. My other agile coaching colleagues have different objectives. Sometimes they even come from different, from different consulting firms, and you're an independent or freelance or whatever. So there's quite a bit to unpack, but essentially, I think, and I remember this conversation always. It's so funny because every time this comes up, I remember a conversation I vividly had with my mom. Younger, I must have been like maybe 10, 11, and we were watching a sporting event or something, and we were having it led to a debate about politics being everywhere. And I said, and my at the time, my naive, young, youth, innocent self was saying, in sports, there's no politics, right? Because, the athletes are there, they train, they compete hard, and, and lo and behold, yeah, it took me just a few years later, maybe, to start understanding, yeah, there is a political element to anything dealing with human nature, and where there's humans involved. And so I think that's something we must embrace and accept, especially when you're dealing in an organizational aspect. But yeah, I think politics is everywhere. Now, how you set yourself up to deal with different levels of complexity. We had Sal Nassim on, in the past, and he talked about, the political aspect of being a watchdog from inside in a body, which was the London Metro Police. And so, so there's different layers of complexity that you have to understand and then be willing to deal with and be equipped then to deal with. And so, I think that's where I think it can get interesting in terms of, how do I then learn to navigate that and understand whether I'm willing to accept that, and whether I accept this aspect of it or that aspect. It's something that exists everywhere. When you go buy a house, there's politics, right? When you're dealing with, in a neighborhood, there's politics. There's the neighbors that get along, the ones that don't get along, the ones who have a certain perception of you. And so that's just, I think, framing that conversation, helping people deal with how to accept that and then navigate that. I think that's
so. I completely agree, and that's really the basis for all of my thinking on it, and for all of my everything that I write and put out there about this thing. And I'm very I'm very focused on and very I hold it dear that politics is everywhere and office politics is absolutely something that's going to play a part of the everyday role of agility practitioners and agility coaches. And like you said there, the different scopes of that as you work your way up through lots and lots of teams, down from a single team up to you know, an executive level view of all of the organizational business architecture all latching together.
Yep.
All of that, you cannot ignore the politics in it, and you cannot stand outside of it. And a bit like we talk about, you know, systems thinking and so on, and we talk a lot about
change
complexity,
management,
complex adaptive systems and so on. Like if you're inside of it, you change it somewhat. So right. So the next question then for you, to invite you to talk about is then that.
Before
So
we go into another question, can I just make
Sure.
one note? Because there are some listeners who might get turned off and think we're idiots hearing. I just want to acknowledge that there is an argument out there. So, Sanjuri, you talked about, you know, agile coach and scrum master and team, and there is a view out there, and I've been involved in these conversations of people who say scrum masters and coaches are the same thing. Agile coaching is something that happens at the team level, and you have to be very technical and understand how to help teams become technically better. That is the only thing that agile coaching is, and all this other enterprisey stuff and coaches, that is an agile coaching. So there is a viewpoint that is right. And so I just want to acknowledge that viewpoint exists. I disagree with it, but that viewpoint exists out there, right?
Yeah, no, yeah, and so then what I was going to say was just sort of like it's adjacent to that as well. So there are quite a few people who, if coaching is in the job title, then the predominant thinking or approach or practice is coaching. And I've even had a conversation with a super fellow that I know that's even got on today, where he's describing to me that what I'm describing about being an office political activist is not the role of a coach. And so I've gone back to that person and said, well, I quite like the Lissa Adkins X-Wing model, where within that it talks about an agile coach or a lean agile coach being an amalgamation, or and I've used the word cocktail, of lots of things that on their own,
different postures, different roles.
The pure spirit of those things, when you add them together, Lissa Adkins and I agree that cocktail is nice and lots of people can enjoy it. But still, like Dan's there saying about, like, well, some people view that you have to be technical, and that is a part of what Lissa Adkins is saying. That is a part of that thing, but you don't only have to be technical. There are lots of other things that feed into that. Whereas there are some people who say, well, no, if it's coach in the title, you have to be a coach. You have to be an accredited coach. And Lissa Adkins also says that, you know, her standard is that it's an accredited coach, and I get that. But the conversation I'm having at the moment is that, like, the other things dilute that coach. And actually, if you go into an organization, you do not take your own biases in there, and you do not take your own worldview, and you are not a political activist. So what do you feel about it? Because my view is that if you go in, the only way you can do that is to not go into an organization. If you, by being in there, you are affecting the system, you will be affecting the politics. There are lots of, I suppose one other thing, actually, and I'll put this into the question, is if that is right, and you can go in and you can be a true coach, and you use, I don't know, clean questions, you don't bring any of your metaphors or any of your emotion into that, does that mean from day to day, as a coach, you could be unplugged, put over there, and another coach can just be plugged right in, and nothing will have changed? There would be no disruption to the coaching that was going on.
I'd say,
I mean, I think not.
Yeah,
right, because you've got just like with, and I hesitate on the comparison to therapy, because coaching is not therapy, But when you out and you search for a therapist, you may not mesh with a therapist.
Did I make a
You know,
comparison
as
to
a,
therapy? How did I do that?
what's that?
How did I make a comparison to therapy?
No, I said I was about to make
Yeah,
a
he's
comparison.
yeah.
And so I hesitate to do that myself.
Right.
But I'm doing it because it helps to make my point of like, if you're going for therapy, like you could go through multiple therapists before you find one that you click with. For
Yeah.
whatever reason, there's things that are there. Same thing is true of a coach. Like you may not click with that person for whatever reason, the way they ask questions, their appearance, Lord knows, there's all sorts of reasons that you may not click with them. You may
Can I
prefer a
stop you
woman
there?
over a man.
Can I jump in
Yeah.
there? So what
Yeah.
is that? What is that? And does that same thing about not clicking, is that
Yeah.
some of the same thing that fuels or exacerbates or ignites office politics?
I mean,
Probably.
I mean,
Yeah. Go ahead, Sanjay.
I think to, you know, just for us in the audience, I'd like to just dumb down the conversation a bit. I think for me, coaching, this is just for
Yeah.
me. I think coaching is at the end of the day, you know, you're brought in to help improve things. If I could just put it in any sort of simple terms, whether you're implementing a framework, you know, help, you know, teach people how to make decisions or whatever, all of those things are to help improve things towards whatever that greater objective, which is sometimes articulated or not, you know. And that's the part where it gets sometimes a little bit icky, because sometimes there's no definition of what you're improving towards or for what, right? And so I think that's where there's a lot of sometimes gray area, where people sometimes get, you know, have their head in the sand as far as like, what is this thing that I'm helping people do better, or set of things I'm trying to help people do better, what's supposed to be the outcome of that, right? So,
Well, and I think Sanjay, that ties right into Matt's question of like,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
do you need to, is it you either join the system or not? And so for me, looking at that and saying, if I'm the person who's been asked to change, I really should be looking at and saying, what is their goal? Like, what is it
Mhm.
they want to change, and what do they view as good? Like, what is their definition of this end result is good?
Yeah.
If I agree with that, maybe I join and I become a part of going to that. If I disagree with that, if I think what they're trying to aim for is not good, maybe I pull myself out. I won't out anybody on this go, but I know coaches are like, I don't really want to work for petrol companies or banks because like I just I don't like what they're doing. And so I just don't want to help them. I'll go help, you know, local government or whatever. And so I think you have to be at one with the company. Like, do you agree with what they find good? And so you either enter or you don't. And once you enter, I agree, you cannot enter a system. Your presence alone, irrespective of how you show up, you are now a part of the system. You cannot be not a part of the system.
Yeah.
So, and I'll jump in there and hand it back to Sanjiri. But so, like you said there, you probably have to have some form of alignment to what the organization's trying to achieve. Even so, generally, we're invited in. It's not the what that they're doing, and so because we can make that decision as me going in as an agile coach, I can make that decision from afar because I'll know what they're about. So even if I really love what they do and they're giving me an opportunity to join them, I'm gonna know that it's not the what they do, it's how they're doing it. That really they're asking me to change. And pound to a penny, my lived experience is you go in and you see things that you're like, yeah, this isn't how I'd do it. I wouldn't do it like this. And they're asking you to, well, how would you do it? And the purest coach, you know, at the end of all this, they might get much the same outcome that I'd get doing what I do. But the purest coach, I think, is saying, I am only going to draw that out of those people. I'm only going to set up situations where they find it within themselves. I feel that's what they're saying. Whereas I'm saying as an office political activist, I can see the things that are pathological and bureaucratic, and I can try and introduce things that are generative and nurturing. I am able to see that as a person. I don't live with outside these systems. And like you were sort of like alluding to earlier when we first got talking, Dan, most of these systems are subsystems of what's going on in the outside world. We can see it out there as well. No person is an island. We interact with all this stuff. And again, that feels to me like I can respect the person that's coming in and saying, I am an absolutely true coach. I'm only going to draw it out of these people. Here's a question then, and I don't think I'll let you answer that last question, but is it all right for me to say, yeah, no, that's not for me. I'm gonna really give them some things that will really benefit them. I'm going to put it in front of them. They have the right to choose or not choose. They even have the right, like if they do not get on with what I'm suggesting, they even have the right to ask me to take it elsewhere. Nothing is stopping them from doing that, and that is casting a vote. But I sort of feel like, in this, what we're talking about, politics and office politics is being passive is still casting a vote. Not doing something is still casting a vote. It doesn't divorce you from the politics of the place.
Yeah, I mean, even not casting a vote impacts the system. Like just the same way where there's like people who don't vote at all, the sort of neutral, whatever, who just stand by, or the recent French elections had they were typically known for having a tremendous percentage of
Like
just
turnout.
bystanders. Yeah, just bystanders
low turnouts
who turn out but don't even decide not to vote. They vote, vote blanc. And so those people affect the system, and eventually the system tries to readjust itself to have a conversation with those people who are bystanders for whatever reason. And so I think the biggest thing I've had to check, and I think that the most people who I've found have found longevity, a certain level of comfort dealing with different systems, different coaching missions, different environments, are the ones who are able to check their ego. Right. I think in what we do, we can wield great influence, hence power. Right. And so if you don't have that
politics,
hence politics. If you don't have that ego that you're able to check and even reset from one mission to another, because you can go from one really sort of, bells and whistles, because you're dealing with a big corporate company that makes trillions of dollars a year. And then, when you go on to the next mission, 6, 7 months or a year later, you're starting from scratch in a totally new environment. They don't know much about you, or even if they do, you're starting to cultivate those new relationships and earn your keep, right? Earn that trust, earn the gravitas, earn the people listening to you, earn that cachet. And so if you don't have that ability to take a reflective look, check your ego, check that humility, and adapt your approach. And whatever your definition of coaching may be, you have to have some level of adaptability into how you interact with this set group of people. You were talking about therapy earlier, Dan. Like that in itself, coaching one person in itself is complex. Coaching a group of people, right, who are under a certain level of duress and who interact with other groups of people who you may directly or indirectly know, that's a whole nother ball game. So I think it's that ability to accept those challenges, understand them, and how you navigate them. And I think, you were talking about entering into a system. So like, I think that's the toughest and most honest conversation you need to have is do I want to do this? Given what I don't know, given what I think I know, but I'm not sure, given what they're telling, but I'm sure that may not be it. Like the known knowns, the unknowns, like the whole, what's that exercise called again? I forget, but I forget what it's called, but basically analyzing what what others know that you don't know, what you know that others don't know, the unknowns, and so once you do that exercise, like you have an honest conversation, is this something I'm willing to go into and figure out how to help them get to wherever they want to get, even if I don't agree with that. Right. And so, some people today may look at X, Elon Musk, and say, I don't want to work for Elon Musk for whatever, and that in itself gives you a sort of posture that you're walking in with, that if you happen to work for that company, that obviously is going to create some sort of bias. So, so I think, however you walk into something, your perception of it is of the challenge at hand, and what you discover as you meet those people, right? And you figure out, oh, it's not as gray and black and white as I thought. These people have stories that I can relate to, and hence that changes your approach. And then you decide to maybe take, look at things differently, and maybe your initial path to value or whatever is different. And so I think, to me, that's what politics is. And it's dealing with that on an at scale level, that takes up a lot of bandwidth, especially when you're not the sole owner of a mandate or a decision being made or how things may be presented. How many times have we done some groundwork, right? We take weeks, months, whatever to set it up. It's taken out of our hands and it's gone and presented by somebody else to another group of people. And we have, that's part of us having to live with that. And so, and I think that's just, it's it's par for the course. That's you deal with that and you learn from it, and then you adjust. I think,
Let me ask you this then. Let me ask you, throw this in as well. some of the things that you've been saying, and we talked about votes and not voting. So autonomy. So we'll often talk, won't we? We'll often talk about purpose, mastery, and autonomy. Clarity, competency, and control, those sorts of things. And those are the sorts of things that are associated with people in our position that we try and establish and encourage within organizations at team level and team of teams level, so that teams are able to make their own decisions. They have autonomy. And so we are often confronted with people, sets of people, larger and larger scales, saying to us, like in Barry Overeem's post earlier, we don't get to make decisions. Now he was talking, I mean, obviously I had said an opinion about those people were saying they're agile coaches and don't get to make decisions. And I'm saying like, oh, right, well, should agile coaches be making decisions? They should be showing people how to make decisions. And we're often confronted with people who don't know how to make decisions or aren't allowed to make decisions. Isn't there an element of, and therefore their decisions do not influence the outcome? So isn't there an element of that is, like you're saying, Sanjiri, maybe I think you say, is that's politics. If you feel like you have no agency and you're disenfranchised, and a lot of people in a lot of organizations seem to feel that, I'm just gonna sit here and wait until they tell me to do something, and then I'll do that thing because I've given up the fight.
Or just cash my
Have
check.
my voice heard.
Yeah.
And that to me sounds like an absolute invitation for an office politics political activist. I'm going to help you get your voice heard. I'm going to help you know what you want to vote for and cast your vote. And I'm going to get you to do it in numbers so that there is like collective action on that.
Yeah. But
you're going to start to be able to take control and have the influence. Oh, we can't do anything. We always do it like that here. How many times do you hear that? Yeah. How much of a trope is that? And it's like, right, okay, well, if you've always done like that here and it's part of your identity and that's what you love doing, like carry on. That is what you do. If we very rarely hear it in that context, though, we hear like, oh yeah, we can't do that because we've always done it like this. Well, okay, so do you want to change that? Let's change that. Let's get that influence muscle going. Let's get you casting votes. Let's get your voice heard. Let's take some collective action. Let's, open up the deaf ears. Let the scales
I love that analogy.
Eyes.
I love that analogy. And it sparks, like, what it brings to my mind is, you talked about, just the process of, think of a grassroots organizer, trying to get people to go out and vote.
Yeah.
Agile coaching is still, again, if you look at just in the grand scheme of things, it's still a kind of a new profession, right? Like we're still working through it. And even organizations, the whole discussion around what agility means for us, what it means, business agility, yada, yada. That's still, it's still a fresh conversation, right? And I think, there are some organizations have had cycles and cycles of transformations or trying to become agile or whatever. So this profession is still making it's still in the sort of upward phase of being adopted, right? And so Now, if you take kind of like our role, and everything that it entails, the analogy with sort of a grassroots organizer who's trying to, you know, get a neighborhood up and voting to understand the sort of, the importance of their vote, the importance of their voice being heard, the initial steps they can take to not feeling disenfranchised, the power that they really have that they don't really realize.
Yeah.
If you look at most of the coaches, there's, especially going to that Barry Overeem post around, I don't have the mandate. Those people, those political activists, organizers, grassroots organizers, they don't have a mandate. They go out and they knock door to door, you know, hitting the concrete, trying to figure out, how do I get these people to believe in? How do I create this momentum? And then, and I do that, neighborhood by neighborhood. And once I have a critical mass of people, I may have something really interesting which I can then scale. Us as coaches, we have a very sort of, upsy-ditty, a little bit snobbish kind of, we figure we come out, we're hired for a job. Oftentimes that's attached to a daily rate, which may be, kind of in the upper echelons, compared to most of the other talent that's usually hired. Right. And that's why it goes back to humility for me. Whatever your daily rate means doesn't mean you have a mandate that clears you free from any of the politics that you or anybody else would have to deal with when they're walking into positions of influence and power, or that deal with getting people's, leading people, getting people inspired, getting people to see a new way of thinking, to see a new way of doing things, being willing to experiment. So, and I think there's very much we can learn from, again, that approach of somebody, who's trying to, get a neighborhood up and believing around, an upcoming vote on, I don't know, like whatever's happening in the neighborhood, like voting for a new stadium, or voting for the new, for new mosque. You know what I mean? Whatever the case may be. So I think if you look at the nuance and posture and approach, like you can clearly see like a real difference in terms of like approach. And I think that it explains a lot in terms of how some of the Agile coaches may be feeling because of their perception of being defeated, not ever being given a chance, not ever being heard. Well, what are we doing, as a community to sort of learn from these mistakes, right, that we make, or this feeling that we may have. So
yeah, and I also think it's hard to have influence, et cetera, when I see I'm not saying it's everybody, but I see a lot of people who call themselves Agile coaches who come into an organization and they vilify executives, right? It's, and I think that that doesn't help, because I don't think that anybody is really in it for, I'm sure people disagree. I don't think there's many people, I'll say that way, who are in it for ill reasons. Like, everyone's got their own personal drivers and whatever. Got it. But I think generally people come in and want to do right by the company and want to do the right thing, and they're just trying to grow the business or grow whatever. And executives largely, I don't think they care how the teams work. I really don't think they care. I think they're like, oh, you want to work that way? Great. Okay. They don't actually, like, it doesn't affect them. So, people sit there and vilify executives about how they don't have a mandate from executives. It's like, well, have you talked to them, or are you off with their teams telling their teams how awful these people are because they don't make the right decisions? There's a certain level of, you have to bridge those two constituencies, and that is a political game, and you have to understand that executives have a frame of reference and the teams have a frame of reference, and you have to bridge those two, and you have to help these people who are in the thick of work to, Matt, to your point, and Sanjuri, about, you have to help them understand how to organize and say, I want to do things differently. Hopefully they already have the autonomy to do it, but if they don't, you help them to find the voice to figure out how they can do things differently. Because I bet you in most cases, the executives just don't care. The only time, I will ask, is that I've seen executives actually care is when there's some belief, and it's usually a misguided belief, I will say that, that there's some regulation that says thou shalt do this way. It typically doesn't, at least in the United States, it typically doesn't say thou shalt do exactly this way. Like, it doesn't say thou shalt do waterfall. I promise you. It might have some phase gating type things in it, but that doesn't mean you can't work in a more iterative way and comply with the law. And so you just have to show, hey, we understand you care about compliance and we understand you care about regulation. We'd like to work this way, and here's how we will work this way and be compliant and, be within the regulations. Like, you just have to help them find the path.
So actually, I think that you've contradicted yourself there. Not in a bad way, but I think you taught yourself. I think they do care. And I think they don't always show that they care. And also, I think that their attitude towards how teams work and stuff changes over time. Often people will work their way up a hierarchy. Sometimes they're just brought in at that level, but they'll have worked their way up somewhere. As you work your way up, you're confronted with broader and broader horizons and more things to manage and make decisions on. And I think that it's a very natural progression in that to, dull your empathy, to so we talked about with Rob and Cherry about sometimes executives, they can appear to be, I think Rob said, like psychopathic, which is one hat that is often hung on some executives. But I agree. I don't think they're not necessarily baddies. They don't choose to be malevolent. But the changing situation and the more and more responsibility they've got, they rely on the cognitive biases to fill in gaps that from way up there are difficult to see the detail, and they make decisions that are broad brushstrokes, and they probably have to at some point choose to think of people as numbers, because there's a lot of numbers. How can you remember all those names? That is sort of a justification of how things get. But again, our job, and that can set a tone for culture, what they tolerate and what they inflict on people, because they're forgetting to view them as humans anymore. They're saying things like teams. It's like, well, teams are made up of individuals, people,
or resources.
Ruth, Bob, Joan, Sanjiri, Matt, Dan. What we have as office political activists have to do is re-establish the empathy. And we have tools to do that as well. We have to, like the whole transparency bit. So, right, get your cross-functional team working very transparently, get them putting the data up and get them putting how the work flows and all that sort of stuff, which allows us to try and invite and get them out of their offices and try and invite them towards the teams. Do things like Gemba walks, set up their own visualizations of the aggregated nature of all the teamwork into portfolio work, into strategic work. If you do that, then you've built a path upwards to see how work at the sharp end sort of aggregates up into shifting the strategic imperatives. But what you've actually also done is built a path back down. And if you can draw those people who have been in ivory towers for such a long time, they've forgotten how to interact with the rest of the workforce. If you can bring them down, they are human, and inspire that in them and get them walking around their people more often, and their empathy will come back.
Well, yeah,
and they will help those people. And that is what servant leadership is. And that's like a buzzword, but we can enact it. And that in itself is an outcome of political activism. It will change the politics, how people judiciously make powerful and influential decisions. It will change that in an organization. And again, I think that's our role. That is what we're here for. We can't divorce ourselves from that.
And the art of that is communication, right? Because oftentimes you have a very short, finite, time frame, time box to convey, articulate, inspire, through these conversations you may have with leadership, right? Sometimes it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Sometimes it's one-on-one. Sometimes it's with a bunch of people. And your ability to communicate, a concept or principle that we all hammer on the head and believe in, which is autonomy, right? Autonomous teams, autonomous thinking, et cetera.
Yeah.
That helps you drive better value.
Empowered,
But we
enabled.
have but we oftentimes, I think one of our shortcomings is we keep selling that the end all be all is autonomy or autonomous teams. But you should be able to, as a coach, draw the line between that autonomy and how quickly that autonomy can help you create that value that you aspire for, that'll help you reach your top line, that'll help you, create better value, that'll help you create a competitive advantage, that'll help you have an environment where people feel like they can make decisions, innovate. So I think that's where one of our shortcomings is. We talk a lot about the principles which leadership have now, they go out, a lot of them, if they're in their positions, they've done some form of electoral stimulation, learning, whether it's Harvard Business Review, Forbes, whatever, too long don't read article they check in on. So they hear these things, they hear these buzzwords, they hear this language, but it's that ability to translate. What does that mean for you? And how do I translate and implement that? Why is that autonomy important? And how is that going to help you as a leader better lead, better achieve whatever results you'd like to achieve, et cetera? So I think that's where sometimes we miss the ball. And I think that ability to articulate, communicate that is
Yeah. Well, I think like
essential.
autonomy without purpose and without mastery, it's not what it's cracked up to be. And I think that's what you're saying is the problem. So and this is why we need to draw executive level people down to where people are working, so they're comfortable around one another. And in that way, the people at the the coal face start to understand what it is the executives are trying to achieve, because you have that interaction. So that's how they become really confident and sure about, well, what is my purpose? What am I using my competencies for? What am I using my mastery for? And then, and also, what we can have is that what we should be creating is that people can see what decisions at all levels people are making all the time, through communication, through openness, through transparency, what decisions are being made. So that so people at the coalface can go, well, I can make decisions down here that will emulate what's trying to happen up there. And people up there are coming down and going, well, I can see what decisions they're making. And this is the thing that I was saying earlier, Dan, about we don't care. They care when it goes wrong. I don't care how my people work. Well, you do when it goes wrong.
I think he was saying they don't care.
Massive,
at least how I understood it was they don't care about how teams work or how the work is done and what methodology.
But they do when it goes wrong, because then there's a massive investigation about what did you do wrong. And this is what I'm trying to instigate is care when it's going right. Care when it's going right. Be around when it's going right, and they will get even righter. And there will be fewer problems when something goes wrong. And also, what I work with a lot with leadership is how you present yourself when things go wrong will set the tone for the future. So if you scare the hell out of people when they go wrong, if you have this investigation that sort of points fingers and blames, then you won't get decisions made again. They will just wait for you to make a decision and tell them what to do. And that is slow and risky. And again, this to me goes back to politics.
That's politics.
Yeah. It's culture. Culture and politics go together.
I got a question for you guys. We even in the midst of this conversation, we've talked a lot about, either at the team level, operational level, right, individual. And we talked about, the upper echelons of leadership. We say leadership, but most times we're talking about the C levels, right? I'm of the belief that, however small an organization or however, especially even the bigger they are, the more complex, obviously. But I think that the real problem is, or one of our real hindrances is we would call the middle management. So those people who oftentimes are our sponsors and who may give you or not give you direct access to, upper echelons of leadership where things can be enacted quicker, right? In terms of how we do things or messaging, communication, inspiration, all these different things. But it's that middle piece. Oftentimes that we are most times that's who are most of the agriculture in contact at some form with middle management. And so you don't have access to upper, C-level leadership most of the times, or at least walking in. Some of us do. You know, I think we've all had missions dealing with that directly, but it's really getting that critical mass of middle management to find their new place, find their new way of leading, embrace themselves. Politics may be done in a different way because that's essentially what they deal with, right? Yeah. The attainment of status, power, influence to continue elevating to wherever they want to get, you know, and hopefully it helps the organization. Sometimes they don't care, but I think what do you guys feel about really that middle piece? One of my friends called that the permafrost.
Yeah.
Which is basically the immovable piece that, you know,
yeah, well, I don't think it is immovable, and I don't think it's well, I think that's what we've been talking about. If its main attribute or the way you describe it is permafrost,
right.
that's because that's been probably inflicted on that layer of people, you know, that they're not listened to and they are struggling to influence. That's why they need an activist. Because they are very active people, and actually, you know, sometimes in some places it ebbs and flows, but a lot of the time we do talk about middle management in quite a negative way.
Yeah,
I just think, I think actually they are and can be the lifeblood of an organization. They are the communicators. They are the people who give cover to people below them. They help technicians articulate things that they couldn't ordinarily because they are of a certain type and they're very logical or whatever. And they help put emotion into the messages that they want to send up. They help put emotion into the messages that come down.
Yeah.
And empathy in the messages that come down. There's a huge amount of work. And so actually, like, yeah, an agile coach should be amongst middle management predominantly, well, it's like predominantly, just like a lot of the time. But I think my opinion is that actually, and I've drawn this before on whiteboards for people, and I've drawn concentric circles, actually all met at the bottom, like an onion. I've drawn like an onion, like going round and round. And our job is to go all the way up and down that.
Yeah.
To get the communication going that jumps levels, that goes through levels, that between levels, up and up one, down one, skip levels. It's to get everybody talking. An organization is a network of interdependent teams delivering services. So let's get them all, let's get that information flowing. And then if information flows, work will flow, which is what people are mostly focused on. And if work flows, then value will start to flow, or at least the means of seeing if this work is delivering value, and then making decisions. If the information's flowing, you can make decisions to go pivot or progress. The fact that that doesn't happen, that's what we're trying to activate, I would say. And it doesn't happen because of politics and culture and what is inflicted on people. Now they're told to shut up and not have a voice or just do the thing that I said. And we're going to be here, like you were saying earlier, Sanjeev, knocking on doors on neighborhoods going, come on, cast your vote. Come on, be active. Come on, join your neighbors, socialize with them. Let's create a groundswell of if you want the people above to know what you want to do, you've got to tell them. Stand up, cast your vote, get your voice heard, use your voice. And I think middle management are a massively key part of that, definitely, yeah.
Dan.
I was just going to say, I think we're probably at length for as much as people want to listen to us drone on for this one. There's stuff I certainly want to get into for next time and stuff I'd like to talk about. I'll leave a thread. What I'll do is I'll leave a thread of like, I lost it in responding. I had a thread. I was like, there's something that I think would make for a good entire episode follow on, but
well, I have got one.
I think we're probably at the.
I've got an open
What's that?
for next time.
What's that?
At least we can open on the fact that agile has always been political. It has a manifesto. It has a manifesto. I think we should start at the manifesto and why we think that manifesto was put together, because that, to me, and we'll go into it next time, is a massively political endeavor, I think. So I think that'd be a nice place to start.
I think even the interactions that those same people that were huddled in Utah, their interactions, if you've seen them over the past 2 decades or so, that's been politics. It's been heavily politicized.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and then it's just human nature. Some of them get along. Some of them used to get along, don't get along anymore. Some of them have had, their belief systems evolved since then. Some of them have, looked at the business aspect. Others have kept with the more purist aspect, from a human centric standpoint. So there's different, and I think we need to learn to accept and embrace it. I think when we do, we can better come to a headway of, where do we want to go, as opposed to constantly just, knuckle fighting over, what's what. And that's kind of where we're at right now with a lot of different
Let's start
topics.
there. Let's start on the Agile Manifesto. Brill.
Yeah, maybe
Well, I'm gonna leave for the record just so I don't lose it. That the thing that I was thinking about was the fact that we talk about politics and sort of almost as if being a politician is a king where you make decisions, and to me that's not a politician, right? A politician, at least it's not what it's supposed to be. Is that they talk to the constituents, and it's about bringing people along with something, and so it's about involving people. And it isn't about, you are a representative as a politician, at least in the United States. And so your job is to represent your constituents. And I feel like an agile coach, that the role is much less about making decisions, which, the people saying, oh, well, we don't have decision rights, so we can't be politicians. Well, hooey, because that isn't really, like, the political role is about involving people, and involving people in change is how you get the change. You can vote for laws, and we kind of talked about this with Sal. You can implement laws and say you have to do things all day long, and you might get compliance, but you aren't actually going to get change until the people themselves change.
Yep.
Yes.
So, yeah. Enacting change.
Do
Right?
that.
Love that. Great outro.
See you next time, chaps.
Thanks for joining us today on Flâneurs, available wherever you get your podcasts. If you like what you heard, you know what to do.